As promised, this video is less than 30 minutes. Hello, welcome back to another video. My name is Alyssa, this is Portraits and Pages, and today I'm going to talk about my favorite fiction books I read this year, 2020. A disclaimer, as if you've watched any list of favorite of whatever year, not all the books that I will be listing were published this year. I just read them this year. Some were published this year, and it's cool that I was able to get on that hype train, but most weren't. So another early disclaimer I want to give is that not all of these are just strictly books. I am including graphic novels in this. Similar to what I did in my other video, which is going to be in the description box, I combined comics/graphic novels and books together on my nonfiction list, so I'm doing that here on my fiction list. On social media, I will be posting my favorite fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels of the year. However, for the purpose of a video, I was like, let's just combine them. It also elevates comics, I feel like, to the status of what they deserve to other stories. And just like the other video, we're going to start up with our honorable mentions of the year. These are books that I loved, but that I wouldn't quite put in my top 10. So, here we go. Number 1 on my runners-up is going to be Deathless Divide by Justina Ireland. This is a follow-up to the book Dread Nation. Dread Nation and Deathless Divide are a duology. It is a historical reimagining of why the Civil War ended and the end results from it. The real reason is that the Union defeated the Confederacy. However, in this version, both sides did a ceasefire because on the Battle of Gettysburg, which is a very important battle even in real life, the undead rose on both sides. So they were like, let's chill out, let's figure out some way to come together. And so the novels take place 10 years after that battle. And so we have zombies, we have the remnants of slavery, it's an interesting way, the way they rehandled it, because the slaves were freed, but not. You'll see. So that's my runner-up number 1, and I read that in March. And then the next runner-up I read in September, which is A Song of Wraiths and Ruins. I absolutely love this novel. I'll explain it very shortly. It's a West African-inspired fantasy, high fantasy, everything's in this complete world, in which you get the perspective of 2 characters, and one character is trying to do a sacrifice. She's a princess to bring back her mother, who she believed was assassinated, and the other character is, I believe, a djinn or just a spirit, captures his sister. He's a refugee, and so the trade-off for his sister is to kill the princess. So they're both out for blood, and it's a very, very good story, and so I put that on my runner-up list. I think one of the reasons that kept it from being in my top 10 is I don't really like the romance too much. I have nothing against them being together. I just think the story would be better if they were friends. So, and that's a core part of the story. The next runner-up is Fledgling, which I talked about not too much in my October to November roundup. I just went on a tangent about Octavia Butler and her work's impact and why I picked the book, and I didn't really tell you what it was about. So this runner-up, Fledgling by Octavia Butler, it tells a story of a young-ish, she looks like 11 or 12, but she's really 50 or 60-year-old vampire who lost her memory, and so she's trying to piece together what's going on. She, while this is happening, is also being attacked, so there's a link between the people that are still hunting her and killing people and where her family is and why her memory is gone. So it's a very good book. And then also I should say one of Octavia Butler's least popular books. So the fact that I really like that one, it makes me more hyped to read her other work. And then my final runner-up is When No One Was Watching, which is a thriller by acclaimed romance writer Alyssa Cole. Now, did I pick her because her name was Alyssa? Yes, but also I heard great things about her and this book. So this book is described as a Get Out with a Hitchcock film, and it is about a young woman mostly tells the perspective from this young woman who moves back to her neighborhood that is slowly getting gentrified. By slowly, I mean very fast. And the gentrification is happening to such a degree that there's something else going on. And so she's trying to uncover that. I don't even want to call her paranoid because she has every right to be scared. And it's just a really good book. And I read that book actually in December. So this is one of the last books I read this year. And I absolutely loved it. I was looking at my other favorites and I was like, can I knock one down to put this one on? And the answer is no. So, sorry, Alyssa. So, let's get into my top 10 favorites of the year. So, the first book I read this year that hits my top 10 favorite is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Now, if you watched the video of my least favorite books this year, there's another book in this series, which was my least favorite, but I will say, and like, actually, I said it in this book, if Cinder was not so good in the Lunar Chronicles, I would not have finished the series after book 3.5. But Cinder is basically a retelling of Cinderella. It involves magic, it involves science, and so it's sci-fi fiction fantasy. And I usually don't like when those are put together, but this one is actually sci-fi and fantasy. It's like a retelling of Cinderella, and each book in the Lunar Chronicles, even though they're not all on this list, I'll give you some context so if you continue. Center's a different retelling of a different, what is it called?
Yeah, I struggle to remember the word fairy tale here.
So we have Cinder, then in the second book, it is Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and then it's Snow White. So, very good. And Cinder is a cyborg who is not affected by Lunar's magic. And we'll see it like that. Okay. The next book on my list is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is the first book by Elizabeth Acevedo I've read. It's my first poetry book I have read by myself. I actually listened to the audiobook, but I bought it and I intend on reading it in the future. Rereading it. And then I read, not that it made the list, but With the Fire on High, and now Elizabeth Acevedo is a must-read author for me. I'll read anything she writes, whether it's poetry or prose, and I just love it. It tells the story of Xiomara. She is a young Dominican woman in, I believe it's New York, and she's interested in poetry, but these forces around her, namely her mother and other things in her faith, cause some rifts between like whether or not she should explore that passion. And so it's very, very good. It's YA contemporary. I'm sure this is probably not the first time you've heard of it, but I'm just telling you to read it. And if you do decide to read it, especially if you're afraid to get into poetry, I really recommend you listening to the audiobook. Elizabeth Acevedo is a poet and a spoken word poet, and she does her own audiobooks, so you'll really get like the feels. It's so good. I can't get enough. The Poet X. So the next book on my list is the first graphic novel on the list, and that is Sex Criminals by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky, I believe. This is a very funny series. I believe there's 6 or 7 of them. I haven't read the last one because it was supposed to come out in September and I've been broke, so I haven't bought it. I did buy, I believe 4 and 5, and I lent it to a friend because I was like, check them out on Libby, and then they're not going to have 4 and 5, so that I'm giving them to you preemptively so that you can read more of the series and not have to wait like I did. It involves 2 people who have the power when they have sex, or is it it's when they orgasm, to freeze time. And so that's a wild that's a wild premise. I was like, okay, let's try it out. And I did expect it to be funny, and it was very funny. However, it was also very heartwarming, very touching, very dramatic. Each book, you're like, what is happening? Because that is not the wildest part. That is just your intro. So I really recommend reading Sex Criminals. I put volume 1 as my favorite book. However, I think the average between all of them, I would probably give a 4 because they were all 4s and 5s. But volume 1 was the one that I fell in love with the story and it kept me going, so I included it. The next book on my list is another graphic novel series, and that is
Cinder
by Jeff, I think his name is Lemire, and David Nguyen. This is a sci-fi futuristic story about this robot. I think his name is Tim because he was a part of a series called Tim, like a model, and it's in the future when robots you don't mess with because there was this big purge that had happened, and it was started by the robots, so robots are discriminated against, and he was frozen, or he was not around. He was, I don't know, shut down. I forgot what happened. I'm giving you a bad explanation of the story. He's not aware of what happened at that time period, and he may be linked to what happened. So this follows the story of Tim trying to find his companion. That's a much better word. He was a companion robot. I think they say that in the novel. So it follows him and different other people's perspective as in his galactic adventure. It's called a space opera, I believe, and that would be accurate. It's very good. It's ripe for, as I said with fledgling in my other video, it's ripe for the adapting, so I would want to catch this before it's adapted so you get to see all the world building that happens. Now, just like with Sex Criminals, except with this book, it has been out for a few years. I have not read the last one. I believe it's volume 6 or 7. And then there's another series that I believe is within the same universe called Cinder. So this is Cinder isn't going down, Cinder isn't going up. So I am excited to read those in the future. And I would not be surprised if Cinder made my top 10 list for fiction novels, graphic novels next year. As you can see from my background, my books are starting to fall because the next book on my list I actually bought because I loved it so much. My plan was to only buy books after I read them this year, and that didn't work out. But I did buy 3, this is 2, and then my other one's a nonfiction of my favorite books this year. And so the next one is Felix Ever After by Case and Calendar. Case and Calendar, I read their book Queen of the Conquered and I really liked it. And that one had mixed positive reviews, whereas this one had very, very positive reviews. And Felix Ever After is about a trans boy who is dead named and outed by a lot of people. He's going to like an art school in this metropolitan area. I don't know if it's quite New York or not. He is trying to discover, and on top of school and all of the things that go on in a YA contemporary novel, he's trying to figure out who is after him, like who is just so hell-bent on destroying his life and making him doubt himself more. It's a very, very good novel. He is kind of an asshole sometimes, but I liked it, and I liked all the stupid things he did because it's very realistic of like what I would have done, I feel like, if I were in his place. One of those being making a fake account online to try and catfish someone he believes is the person who dead named him. And for those that might not know what that term means, I've said it a few times. Dead naming is saying a trans person's name that they were given at birth. Very much a no-no. You go by the name that they have now, and this person, whoever dead named him, has the animosity towards them to post pictures of them pre-hormones and put their name everywhere. So it's a very, very good novel, very endearing, very cute, very beautiful cover. I don't have a lot of orange books, and so I'm glad I have this one. Oh, and there's this like corny tagline that it says, Felix Love has never been in love, and yes, he's painfully aware of the irony. It's just a lighthearted book. It's a good read for a terrible year. The next book on my list is a very interesting one, and that is City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book is a historical fiction, not really coming of age, well, kind of, even though it's not YA, novel about this woman who I think it's set in the 20s and 30s, and she is sent to New York in this time period. She's very wealthy, by the way, to go live with her aunt and figure out what she's going to do in life. And her aunt runs a playhouse, and so she's interacting with all these interesting characters, and she starts to see, like, living in a very unorthodox way, which is among actors and among people, different ways of expressing their sexuality as well, and rules for life. We're talking about the 20s, when most people, like, still live with their parents until they got married, especially women. And so she's not going to school, which people did at that time as a placeholder for marriage. She's not going to school, she's working, and so she's living in this place that is very out of the norm and, like, kind of figure out who she is. The bad sides, too, might I add, because she does some stuff that is not okay, and it's really, I feel like it's very reminiscent of the way we're all searching and idealizing people and the things we do to replicate that, and I'm thinking about it in the ways of, like, social media, but she's doing it with actresses and starlets of that time period. And I believe it's called the Golden Age of Cinema, but if it's not, it's like when the Hollywood star was like a big deal. And she is doing plays, but the level of success and glamour is equivalent-ish at this time, as it is in the present for some people. Something interesting about this book is if I would have known who wrote it, I would not have touched this book with a 10-foot pole. Elizabeth Gilbert is a writer of Eat, Pray, Love, and while I've not read the book, I think I've seen snippets of not the whole thing of the movie. Maybe it wasn't memorable. The discourse around one person going into another space, usually a white woman, to find herself, and all of the people of color characters just acting as a way to supplement the white character's journey is very problematic, and so I would have assumed other books like this were of her, but she's either grown as an author or stayed in her lane, so I feel like that's a very good book. And another element of City of Girls I like is that the main character, is telling the story as an adult, like as an elderly woman, and she's writing to somebody. So you get to figure out who she's writing to by the end and why she's telling the story at the point that she's telling it. She's telling her life story. So it's very good. I really hope they make a movie out of it. I feel like it'll be super cute and very pretty. So the next book on my list, Shuri Volume 1, The Search for Black Panther. I only have Volume 2. I don't have Volume 1. And the reason I own Volume 2 is I kept waiting, like, maybe my library's going to get it. And they never got it, specifically on Libby. And they're not really prone to updating Libby as much as they are their other app. And I'm not going to go in person because we're in a pandemic. So I bought Volume 2. I actually didn't like Volume 2 as much, but I loved Volume 1. Each one, like, I wanted to stop and go, like, tell my partner, like, hey, you need to read this because this person showed up and this person came up. And it's like each issue within the volume has a different, like, other really cool person in the Marvel universe come in. In this story, Black Panther is missing, and she is kind of torn whether or not she's just going to completely take on the mantle or not. There's also other things going on that I can't really explain without getting into spoilers. So we're just going to say it's a very fun book. The cover is so stunning that I was concerned that it was just going to be like a pretty book, but it's not. It's very fun to the point where I was like, the second one has to deliver. And it didn't quite deliver in some ways, but this one was just like 5 out of 5 stars. Fantastic. Hey, it's Editing Alyssa here. If you watch Curtis Connor or just a lot of YouTube, this will seem kind of familiar to you. I forgot to edit something in, and that is Let's Go Swimming on Doomsday by Natalie C. Anderson. This is another one of my favorite books this year. While not an Own Voices book, Miss Anderson worked in the UN for 10 years, specifically working with refugee children from war. She also is very transparent with the fact that it's not Own Voices, that you should be reading books from people that actually live these experiences. So I really appreciate that, and I already love the book, and it just made me respect her more. Not only that, but people from third world countries, I haven't seen any from specifically like Somalia and stuff talk about this book, but others have spoken to the honesty in this book and the way countries like the United States come in to help but can often do more harm than good. And so, let me tell you what the book's about. The book's about a young boy named Abdi, I believe. It's been a minute since I listened to the audiobook, so I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He's kidnapped by the American government. I don't remember which, if it's CIA, FBI, one of some group, the military, and he is forced to go into Al-Shabaab, which is a real terrorist organization, by the way, in the real world. He's forced to go in and act as a double agent for the Americans because they need information, and his brother is kind of like a higher-ranking child soldier general now, which is, if you look into Al-Shabaab and other terrorist organizations, using children is very common. Yeah, it's a whole lot. So they send him in to do that, and why would he agree to help them? Because if he wants to? No, that's stupid. He would die. They say they have his family, and they're going to also kill him if he doesn't cooperate. So basically, he either dies or he dies, so he does it. I think this is technically YA, but this is a very, very heavy YA book. There's no lighthearted, oh, we're in high school, blah, blah, blah. No, school is another topic discussed in this book because schools are frequently targeted by terrorist organizations to recruit child soldiers because there's a lot of children there, and depending on what school you go to, you can specifically pick out the age and gender of your soldier. So it's a lot. The book is very, very good. I very much recommend it. This was genuinely one of my favorite reads this year. Okay, back to the Alyssa that fully intended on being on camera. The last 2 books I both read in December, and that is Slay by Brittany Morris. Well, I'm going to do one at a time. That's Slay. The first one we're going to do is going to be Slay by Brittany Morris. This is a contemporary YA story. I'm trying to figure out what other genres. What genres did I put? Contemporary YA. That's all I put. Well, okay. It follows this young black girl who is very, very smart, kind of keeps to herself, except for her, like, small group of friends. And outside of school, she runs this open world place for black gamers. And that's very vague, but sorry if you don't play video games, this terminology might be a little confusing. But it's an open world game where you battle, and it has a card system, and it's really, really cool. And something happens in real life that affects not only the online game, but her life. And that real life thing puts this spotlight on her game, which is it has, I think, it has over 100,000 active users, but it's still not like Overwatch or Call of Duty. Like, it doesn't get that much. It doesn't have millions of users. And it got press, and the press was wondering, the press as well as certain commentators were like, that's not fair. This game is racist because it doesn't allow white people to play. This place is just supposed to be a space for black gamers to not be harassed. And as a person who plays video games, that is not only a black
person,
but a woman, I can say being called all these slurs, all these names on basically the daily basis. Like, if you want to play that day, you're going to be called a name. Online games specifically. And so it's a safe space for that, and LGBT people. And people take it as an attack on whiteness to not be included in there. There's very interesting conversations in the book. It's very accessible, and it's very much like, what made me the most happy about this book is that it lived up to the hype. It has everybody that I know that has read it loved it. And when I say everybody, I'm talking about people on YouTube. And as a person who plays video games, it can get cringy real quick. And this game did not. This book did not, as far as the way that they built the world. Now, some of the stuff you could say, like, because it was YA and it talks about such deep topics that they have to do some rudimentary conversations that to me were like, okay. Or for some of the audience coming in, they may need that. So, and it's YA, so it is introducing a lot of things to a lot of people, but that didn't bug me. I felt like it was good. We got there and we moved on. And the writing for the characters was so phenomenal. I loved or hated people off the bat, and my instincts were right. I would like say something like, oh, this guy's our Hotep, and then like 2 chapters later, they'd be talking about Hoteps. I'm like, good, because, okay, it's just very good. So it's a little bit of a mystery, YA contemporary fiction, and I loved it. I will be purchasing that book, and I'm really excited to see what else she has to write. The final book that I read that is going to be in my top list for this year is Such a Fun Age by Kelly Reid. This book, whenever I read it, I was like, I need more. I need to talk to some people about this. This is a book you talk about, and nobody I know has read it. So I went online. I followed Julesy on YouTube, and she has her Smart Brown Girls book club, and they read it earlier this year. And when they read it, I could not get it because it's literally weeks or months, depending on what library card on Libby I'm using. And I'm trying, except even though I broke my rule, I was really trying not to buy books until I read them this year. And I will be purchasing this one. After I read the book, I literally went on YouTube and was looking for interviews with the author, because I was like, I have thoughts, I have questions. Somebody else must have asked them. I want to know what her thoughts were when she wrote this book. I want to know who it was for. I want to know certain choices that she made. Not in a bad way. I'm just like curious. So I watched probably the equivalent of 4 or 5 hours worth of interviews and discussions about the book or with the author, or about the book with the author in most cases. It follows this black babysitter who, something happens late one night where she's not supposed to be babysitting, and the white family that she takes care of one of their children, sometimes both, is like, there's this situation at the house, the cops are here, we need you to take her for a few hours. She's all dressed for the club, so she's not ready to be babysitting. She's like, are you sure this is how I'm dressed? I'm like, yes, it's fine. We trust you. It's okay. Like, this is us calling you. This is your off time. So she picks up the kid who she really, really loves, and they go to the grocery store, and she's with her friend, and they're dancing in the aisles, and it's like, trying to keep this kid from asking, why are we not home? Where is mommy? Why are you looking like this? You're so pretty, you know? And the security guard of the store is called by this white woman because she believes that the kid is kidnapped. And this kid is at an age where, like, they call everybody around them a nickname except for mom. You know, they can say mama, and then everybody else is something. The kid is freaking out, and this altercation is filmed, and a bunch of stuff happens from there. I don't want to say anymore. This book, this woman does not want to deal with this. Once the situation is over, she's like, let's just drop it. This stuff happens to me all the time. However, everybody, especially all the white people in her life, like well-meaning white people in her life, are trying to aid the situation. They're trying to fix it. They're trying to bring justice for her. They're trying to do all this. And they're all doing it for different reasons. They will tell themselves it's altruistic, but there is some ulterior motives. that they don't maybe necessarily want to admit. So it's very, very good. It showed a different type of protagonist, which was very interesting to read, and that is someone who is just okay getting by in life. She's not necessarily struggling, like, she's not affluent. She's very complacent in her life and is not very ambitious. She's not very ambitious, so that was just an interesting kind of character to read, because you always read characters who are ambitious, especially female characters, and I feel like that lines up with who I am and how a lot of people see themselves, but this woman was not, and that's okay, because not everybody has to do this, and this. And yeah, it's just a very good book. I hope you enjoyed this video. I also, as I said in the beginning, put out a top 10 with some honorable mentions, nonfiction books and graphic novels I read this year. I put, I don't think I put a number, it was 7 or 8 books that I hated this year, or I shouldn't say hated, were the worst books, even though I straight up hate some. Future videos to look out for is going to be, I'm going to be putting out a goals list of 2020, as well as a reflection of my art this year. I have not done any art videos since I started uploading to this channel again. So I'll be doing a reflection of the art that I created this last year, showing some of them, and then talking about some goals I have for next year, for 2021. So if you enjoyed this video, please click on the like button and consider subscribing. If you're already subscribed, check out another video, because maybe you haven't watched them all. And I already privated the cringy ones, so you don't have a wide selection, but there's some stuff out there. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in 2021. We're so done with this year.